Hello, Mai-Kee. I'm super excited for you to be joining us. I've been a big fan of your work from ever. You probably know, like I DM you on Instagram every time you share something. So I am super excited that you're going to be on and chatting with the terrain community today. So what are you going to be teaching us?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me here, Iman. And I feel like I have to do this now. The thing that made you spit out your tea, like in the DMs, it's like, the trainees. Like, I'm such a dad joke kind of person. But anyhow, thank you so much for having me. So honored. And I'm going to be here speaking with you all about how to amplify your voice, how becoming a guest expert on aligned podcasts can really help you to grow your business and deepen your impact. Ooh, so I've got some beautiful slides ready for you. So let me just quickly hit share from my screen.
Perfect.
All right, so amplifying your voice. So Iman, can you quickly unmute yourself? Let me know if you can see this.
I can. Things look
Okay,
good.
wonderful. Thank you. All right, so I've got some little slidey slides for you all. So again, amplifying your voice, guest expert, podcast guesting. That's pretty much my area of expertise. So for those of you who don't know me and not already know my friendship with Iman, let me quickly introduce myself. So hi, I'm Mai-Kee Tsang. So think of the month of May, the letter K, and I've got a silent T in my surname. All right. So my name is Mai-Kee Tsang, and I'm a podcast guesting strategist and the sustainable visibility mentor. I coined the term, that little TM there, pending trademark. Anyhow, I help underestimated introverted leaders to feel safe in the spotlight when they guest on aligned podcasts. So that way they can become sustainably visible to grow their business for the long haul. Now, of course, I did not start out this way. I'm actually an accidental expert, and this is how it all happened. So in June 2019, my referral well ran super dry. So what I mean by that, when at that time in my business, I relied so much on referrals that I was very complacent. I was very lazy, let's be honest. I was very lazy with my own marketing because like, oh, do you know what? I got referrals coming right left and center. I'm good. I don't need to do anything else. And of course, that bit me in the ass. So there's one day where it just stopped coming. So what did I do? First of all, I panicked. And then I reached out to 4 of my mentors at the time, and they all simultaneously advised me to start guesting on podcasts. They said, you need to build your authority, Mai-Kee. You need to fill your pipeline. So I challenged myself to reach out and personalize 101 pitches in 30 days. And here's what happened. I received a yes for 1 in every 3. Straight from the get-go. No follow-up. Actually, in retrospect, I should have followed up with a lot more of them. I think that percentage would have been higher, or that fraction rather. And I'm not saying that you have to pitch 101 podcasts in 30 days, because actually I don't recommend that. That actually goes against the whole sustainable visibility thing. But this was at the time. This is what I challenged myself to do, because I didn't actually have client work at the time to actually use up my time anyway. So I could. Not saying to recommend this, but just take what resonates, leave behind the rest. Anyhow, doing that earned me the privilege, it earned me the opportunity and honor to guest on over 50 podcasts, some of them which you might be familiar with. And this number keeps going up and up and up because now I've been on quite a lot of podcasts now. I get a lot more invitations and I do pitches. But if you're in a position when you're thinking, I don't know who's going to want to invite me, you actually have all of the tools in this workshop today that you're going to need in order to actually do this for yourself. Because when you're at the beginning of your business, or maybe this is the first time you're ever guesting on a podcast, you need a very strong degree of self-advocacy, right? So I'm sure there's going to be some questions at some point about, am I ready to do this or not? That's going to come later. But I just want to say, you do not have to have the connections. You don't have to have 10 years of experience like to do this, because in the PR world, everybody says, oh, I've got 10 years of experience. And my answer to that is, if I had 10 years of experience, I'd still be a teenager. So I'm in my 20s still. So it wouldn't have made sense for me to work on that as a teenager because I didn't even know what I wanted to do back then. But I digress. what does it actually mean for my business though? So I've been on these podcasts. What did it actually translate to in regards to revenue? So let me show you. I started to book dream clients, the people who actually didn't doubt the value that I could provide. Because I think for a lot of us, we've had that experience where we feel a bit undermined, or like our word doesn't have a lot of weight when we come to big decisions for our clients in the projects that we do. But I noticed that because of the positioning from the podcast guesting, I started booking clients who wanted to work with me because of how I illustrated my expertise on these interviews. What did that look like? Here's a screenshot of a type form, because everybody who's interested in working with me, they do need to fill out a form, right? So there was a question that said, how much are you open to financially investing in order to be featured on podcasts? So that was the service I offered at the time. This person wrote $3,000. And there's a question, how did you hear about me? So if you're wondering how to track how important your podcast guesting is doing for you, I recommend having a question like this in your intake forms. How did you hear about me? And this person said, I heard you on the Online Course Masters podcast. That podcast has yielded me a lot of very qualified leads. Granted, it's not for a service I offer anymore, but I'm able to refer them out, right? Helping the community. But can you see here, this person, when I spoke to her, this was the first time we spoke. She had not emailed me ever before. She didn't even know of me, so therefore we couldn't have had any contact whatsoever. But the expertise illustrated in that interview was enough for her to not only reach out, but to be willing to invest a significant amount into a service that I was providing. That's what can happen if you position yourself correctly as a guest expert on podcasts. Number 2, what did it do? There were consistent influxes of engaged subscribers to my email list, and I emphasize engaged, because when someone has heard you for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 60 minutes and beyond, they're going to be pretty invested in you. So we all have freebie seekers with people who want to download our stuff and we never hear from them again. But what I've noticed is that it doesn't matter to me how many people are subscribing to my email list. I care about what that means. Like, are they responding to my emails? Are they following me on Instagram, sending me DMs and commenting on my stuff? Are they still engaging long after they've subscribed? So I've noticed that the quality of subscribers to my email list are a lot higher, especially as they come like after an interview. So there's something for you there too. And I get invited to teach inside paid courses and memberships and masterminds, summits, stages. What I want to emphasize here that getting on a podcast is not the end goal. Absolutely not. A lot of people think it is, but it's not. What really matters is actually the relationships that you build with the host, with the audience of that host podcast. It's literally like a gateway into so many other opportunities. But it can only be that way if you approach them in a very ethical manner. So later on, when I talk about the PR method, that's all you need to remember. And I guarantee you are going to significantly increase your chances of getting yeses to these pitches, to start building these relationships, to have really important conversations, and to position yourself as a guest expert because you are one already in your field. So that's what it meant for my business. So I would love to see, like, now you see all the possibilities of what podcast guesting can do. Which areas of your own business would you like to grow the most? Is it to attract more clients? Is it to grow your email list? Perhaps for an eventual launch where it's not a one-on-one client, but a one-to-many offer? Or C, is it purely for the purpose of building deeper relationships? And there is no wrong answer. So I just want to ask you to take a note of your thoughts. And if you are watching this as a replay, feel free to share your insights on the roundtable as well. You can go to the roundtable area for a discussion there. But yeah, just take a note, like, what is jumping out at you? And it's okay that's all three, by the way, because even if you do have a singular goal for podcast guesting, you're probably going to reach all of these anyway, and more than that. So just take a note. What resonates with you? Okay, so let's keep moving. Before we get into the pictures, when I actually show you some pictures, and I'm going to throw myself under the bus for one of those, because I think it's really important for you to see the pictures that I've sent, both good and bad. But before we do get into that, there is one mindset shift that I always recommend, and this is something that I learned the hard way. And now that you're learning from me, I hope that you will not make the same mistake. So here's a shift. Service over self-importance. Just let that sink in. Podcast guesting isn't just about building your authority. Of course it is, that's why you're even considering it right now. But please don't let that be the forefront of your outreach. Because remember, it's also about building relationships. We've all seen it in TV shows, or maybe you've even experienced it in your real life, where someone hasn't kept in contact with you for years. Suddenly they come out of the blue asking for a favor. It feels off, right? It's like, I feel you're just using me for what I have, but you haven't really made the effort to care about me. Every podcaster is a human. Yes, they're a business owner, but ultimately they are a human being as well. And they are going to feel it if it's the other way around. They will feel it if it's self-importance first, service later. Because to be honest, if they feel any degree of self-importance coming from you, they're not going to care about the service because they're already going to feel like they're being used. So for any mindset shift I can share with you today, it's this. Service over self-importance. Okay, so fancy seeing some actual pictures I sent? I'm going to show you the bad and then the good, because I think it's important to kind of like end on a high. So the first one, I'm going to throw myself under the bus, because again, I need to show you what did happen, so hopefully you won't do the same thing. Here's the first pitch I ever sent. So I'm not going to reveal this person's name, but just for all other workshops that I've shown this, I'm just going to call this person Sam. So, hi Sam, are you currently taking guests for your podcast? I'm a launch strategist and conversion copywriter. That's my old title. And I would love to be able to share my insights on how to build your authority as a small business owner, especially during times of launching. I'm currently conducting a challenge of also pitching to a 101 podcast as well, and I'm happy to break that process down if you feel it could be beneficial for your audience. If this resonates with you at all, I'd love to hear from you. If not, no worries. And wish you all the success and can't wait to see what you do with your 100th episode coming out in a few months. All the best, Mai-Kee. From the format, you can tell it is not an email. And it's all right to send pictures via, social media. It's okay to do that. Preferably not as unsolicited pictures, which is exactly what this was. So not only am I going to show you this pitch, I'm going to show you what Sam said. So I actually got to give a great shout out to Sam, because it's because of him that I have actually refined my method so much to never do this again. So here's what he said. Hey Mai-Kee, hope you're doing well. I'm really focused on some very specific topics at the moment, and conversion copy isn't one of them. I'll keep you in mind for the future. He didn't keep me in mind, but that's okay. But a piece of unsolicited advice telling me that you're pitching yourself to a 101 podcast is a bit of a turnoff. It tells me you're looking for quantity, not really good fit. Podcast hosts generally want to feel special, like you're really focused on them. So if I were you, I wouldn't tell other people that you're pitching to a 101 podcast. No. Okay. So take a note, just feel what it would have been like to be in my shoes, because I will tell you, I felt so ashamed. I felt so disappointed in myself. I ran to my mastermind peers and I told them that I wanted to hide under a rock. This was my first of 101 pitches, so I had 100 to go, and I wanted to quit on day 1. But again, after I let myself have a little pity party and just feel all the feels, I went back to this feedback because he's right. I should. I should make every host feel special because that's what they deserve. And as a podcast host myself, I'm the host of the Quiet Rebels podcast. I do keep a strong eye out for pitches, that was sent the way that I sent this one to Sam. Right? So I know what to look for as a host. And now I realize the responsibility I have and what you have as a potential guest. So, on that note, why do you think this pitch didn't work? Right? So, if you need to, you can hit pause on this training and just take a note of your thoughts. What was wrong with this pitch? You can be brutal. I've had people give me feedback. I've asked them to give me feedback like on live workshops. So I'm actually hearing them. But yeah, take a note. Be super brutal because this is the kind of thing that I want you to take into account when it's your own pitching. Right? All the things that I did wrong here, take a note so that you don't do that. Okay? Awesome. Now, that was the bad pitch. So you bet your honey buns that I have redeemed myself, I hope, because I want to show you what a successful pitch looks like. So this is one of my best pitches, and my pitch method that I teach in my own workshops and my own programs and things, they are based off this kind of style. And just a heads up, this can seem a bit on the longer side, and that's okay. If you're a short, succinct writer versus a long form writer, that's okay, because the PR method is going to catch you both, no matter which way, where you may be on that spectrum. But here we go. Here's the subject line: podcast guest request for TCC. Let's get some copy mold over ground. That's a rat emoji. Pretend that's a mole. Hey, Rob and Kira. My name is Mai-Kee Tsang. I'm a fellow podcaster, copywriter, a copy mole in the underground, and a 2019 student in your think tank mastermind. So I'm hoping you may know me a little by now. I wanted to reach out to both of you today to ask if you think your TCC audience would benefit from learning how to build their authority and increase their visibility, i.e. going from being underground to overground by guesting on podcasts. After binge listening to the TCC podcast when I first started my copy biz in June 2018 and meeting Rob IRL in London the following month, I know that you love interviewing copywriters, experts about their process, habits, successes, and failures for your audience to steal an idea or two. And I believe I could really contribute to the conversation and have something still worthy for them to use in their own work. If this is piquing your interest in any way, here are some ideas that we can possibly cover in an interview. How to overcome the mindset blocks that will happen when you pitch the podcast, especially the bigger ones. Things like, who am I to pitch this person? I don't have enough experience to be an expert, etc. The 8 elements to writing a value-rich and audience-serving pitch. What to actually do when it's interview day, including my secret ramp-up routine to get into states. And if you'd like to get the inside scoop of my one-on-one podcast pitch challenge, there are no questions you can't ask. But of course, I'm totally open to your own spins and angles to best suit your audience. And finally, whether or not I'm a good fit for your podcast, I truly wish you all the continued success for your show. And will continue to be a super fan of TCC no matter what. All my best, Mai-Kee. P.S. If you want to hear what my voice is like, pinky promise, I don't sound like nails on a chalkboard, or so I'm told. And then I popped the link to my podcast, Quiet Rebels. P.P.S. Being a podcaster does have its perks. I've got all the equipment to ensure the audio quality will be top-notch. Hello, Blue Yeti, if we do decide to go ahead. Before I ask you to take a note of your thoughts, I do want to reiterate this part here. When Sam said, don't tell people about the one-on challenge, you're probably like, Mai-Kee, you did it again. Why did you put it in there? The reason why I put it in there is because one of my mentors, who I pitched to here, it was her idea to do 30 podcasts in 30 days. And I just decided to make that 101 instead of 30. That's the only reason why I put it in there. Otherwise, I wouldn't have. But I also know that Rob and Kira, they do like the behind the scenes stories of why I decided to do certain things, and the same with all their guests, right? That's the only reason why. But anyhow, now that you see what a successful pitch looks like, why do you think this worked? Take a note of your thoughts immediately. Like, what do you think I did differently compared to the one with Sam? How would you feel if you was in Rob and Kira's shoes reading that, and that was for your podcast? Just take a note of anything that's coming up for you, note it down. And again, as a reminder, if you're watching this at the replay, feel free to go to the roundtable discussion area so that you can flesh out these thoughts with your fellow terrainees. I'm still just going to keep laughing at myself for that. Anyhow, just feel the resonance in your body. Just take what resonates, leave behind the rest. Okay? Now, the PR method. What is this and why is this all you need? Well, when it comes to podcast pitching, like sending your pitch to guests, I do have 7 elements in a breakdown. I'm not going to share it with you today because it can get very overwhelming trying to remember it all. That's why I've distilled it even further into the PR method, which is much easier to remember. And to be honest, no matter which industry you're in, no matter how much expertise you may have, how many podcasts you've been on, this is always going to be relevant. Podcast guesting, it may change over time, but trust me, this is one of those things that's always going to matter and it won't change. So what is the PR method? Personalization. Okay, so when I introduce myself as Mai-Kee Tsang, if you can see how my name is spelt, it's Mai-Kee. When someone pitches me and they don't spell my name correctly, it pisses me off. If I'm quite honest, it pisses me off. I'd forgive them a little bit if they didn't put in the hyphen, but if they spelt my name wrong, even after that, it would piss me off because the email that they are sending this to has my name in it. If someone knows anything whatsoever about my podcast, they would know how my name is spelled. If they went to my website to even do a little bit of research, my name is spelled with a dash, with a hyphen. So if a pitch starts with, hi, like insert incorrect spelling, or no name at all, I'm not going to care like how great the rest of the pitch is, because to me, that's already a sign that it's sent en masse. No podcaster wants to feel like they're a part of your list. And I own my mistake that I made to Sam, because that's exactly what I did to him. Until he gave me that feedback, which I'm so grateful for to this day. Because I want to make every host feel special. And I hope that you do that, simply by personalizing with their name, referencing their show, because I've had pitchers say, hi Mai-Kee, I love your show. Your show is great. And I'm like, really? What's my show called? Yeah, I've gone a little bit more spicier when it comes to rejecting folks, because now I see through it all. And I want people to see you as you are, not to see through you. And it starts with this, the P, personalization. That acts as the initial hook. When you got someone's name right and you're referencing their show, they're going to be curious, because it's like, interesting, someone's got my name right, they're referencing my show, what do they have to say? I'm curious. So this is the hook. What is the R? Relevancy. Ooh, is this important? Yes, the personalization is going to get you the foot in the door. But the relevancy is what's going to take you through that doorway into the room. Relevancy. What's relevant for the host? The kind of conversations that they're having, the audience that they serve. Maybe there is a global issue that they are really on top of and they want to talk about through your lens of expertise. Whatever it is, make sure that your topics, that you are not getting them to apply themselves to you. It needs to be the other way around, because you're asking to be on their platform. So make sure that it's relevant for you, make sure it's relevant for them and their audience, and if there is some wiggle room for any relevancy to a global issue that they are on top of, that they care about. The PR method, it is that simple. Make sure it's personal, make sure it's relevant. That's all you got to remember when you're going to pitch. So, on that note, thanks so much for tuning into this mini workshop on how to amplify your voice on podcast guesting. Now, in case there are any questions, so Iman, I'm inviting you back, to come back into the room for any questions that you may have had or that come up for you. And I realize how dark my window is. I might have to turn on the light in a minute, but yes, I hope that gives a good base summary of where to start. Trust me, you can't go wrong with making things personal or relevant. If someone says no to you, take a note of the patterns. Is there a pattern that's happening as to why you're getting no? Or is it something that's completely out of your reach? If it's because they're fully booked, it's not good timing. If you approach any host in a personal and relevant way, that's going to keep the door open to anybody. But if it's not a good timing, they might just come back to you later on. But if you do the whole self-importance before service thing, that's going to close the door before you even had a chance to put your foot in. So on that note, Iman, I'm going to hand the mic back to you for any questions that have come up. I'm very curious to hear how you found this.
Well, I mean, I've been listening to your stuff for a while, but I still thought this was really, really a great primer for people getting started, but I do have questions. So just for people who are getting started, how do they go about or rather, how do you go about finding podcasts? Do you just look through the podcast app and make a list of everything that interests you? Do you look at where your peers have shown up? What's your process for finding a podcast to pitch?
Oh, this is good. So I'm going to give you 2 ways. There are at least 5 ways that I know of, but I'm just going to share 2 of them. So number 1, when I researched the 101 podcasts for my challenge, what I did was that I looked at the podcasts that I would love to have been on. And then I just typed them into Google. And I go to the Apple podcast link. I don't go to the host website. Go to the Apple link. Because when you do, you're going to be on the Apple podcast directory, whether you realize it or not. And all you need to do is scroll to the bottom of that page and you're going to find 2 sections. You're going to find top podcasts in X industry or listeners also subscribe to. Boom. Spiderweb. There are so many webs that can be formed just from doing that alone. And if you do that method, let me just say, it's so easy to fall down the rabbit hole. So set yourself a timer because you can be stuck there for hours because that's what I did. You may find yourself coming across the same podcast every now and then, but that's because they're all interconnected. I'm pretty sure there is some metadata that is in play there as to why they're showing up in certain places, but just seeing what keeps coming up, and obviously you get to choose which podcasts that you want to pitch to. So just take a note of the ones that resonate, and again, leave behind the rest. That's method number 1, the Apple Podcast spiderweb interconnected links, right? And my second method, this is my personal favorite. This is the one that I go by now. Is I call it peer at your peers. So I'm super nosy. So when I see a peer of mine, someone who I greatly respect about what they talk about, and they're either in the same industry or an adjacent industry, then I just take a note of where they're showing up, oh, who are they speaking to? Because if I like what my peer is doing and my peer and I, we have, pretty much the same values, maybe this host could be someone who I want to talk to too. So it's super official. I just take a screenshot of where I see this. I put them into my phone. And then when I feel like it, I look through that, my album on my phone to see oh yeah, maybe I should get along with doing that. It's not the most perfect system, but I find that the peering at your peers, that you're often just 1 or 2 degrees away from reaching that host. And on that note, I just want to give a little bit of insight there. I never ask personally for an introduction. I never ask my peer, like, oh, can you introduce me to that person? Maybe that's just me, but I feel a little bit iffy doing that. So here's what I do instead. First of all, I listen to their interview. Second, I congratulate them on it, and I give a specific takeaway so they know I'm not just talking out my ass. And I ask for advice. I ask, hey, I'm interested in speaking to so-and-so as well. Do you have any advice about, what could resonate with this person? I'm thinking XYZ. Don't get your peer to do the thinking. Just ask for their advice, because people love giving advice. It's a low risk for them. Versus if you ask them to do an introduction, and if you do get introduced and something goes wrong, it reflects on your peer. And I just never want to put my peer in an uncomfortable position that way. But again, that's just my speculation. You do you. But I find that asking for advice from your peer and actually giving a specific takeaway from the interview so that you're being genuine about it, it's much better. So those are 2 ways I recommend: the spiderweb, interconnected Apple podcast directory, or doing the peer at your peers thing. Super official and unofficial.
I love that. I'm also super smart. I had no idea that you could just scroll through the bottom and find that whole web. That's super, super cool. Okay. My last question, and this is a super self-interested one because I'm always really curious about people's systems and processes to keep things organized. So when you did the 101 podcast, and then, even after that, as you've continued to pitch people, how do you kind of keep track of who's replied, which pitches have been accepted? What kind of system do you have in place to keep things organized?
Oh yes, and I just blinded myself with this ring light. I should have turned my light on, but hey, imperfect showing up here. So I have a handy dandy Google sheet. So you can go super fancy with Asana if you want to, and just duplicate the same task over and over again. I find it easier for me personally to see an overarching view. So what I do is I have a directory. A blank directory to start with, right? And then I have different columns. Actually, I can link this to you if you want.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, just copy it and make it your own. But just how I use it. So I put the podcast name and I hyperlink it to the name, so that way it's not super messy with all these really long links. So I put in the name and I hyperlink it. I put in the host name or names, depending on how many hosts there are, and hyperlink it to the website. I make a note sometimes why I want to pitch to them, right? Oh, they talked about this, so that's why I want to talk about this. And there is this a drop down where you can check the status of everything. So pitch sent, pitch accepted, on hold, declined. You can just already see from a visual perspective of when you see all the greens, they are all the ones that are accepted and ready to go. All the reds tell you oh, they said no, and all that kind of stuff. And the columns that I have after are really important, because I briefly mentioned it in the mini presentation that if you get a decline and you find that they're consistent, there might be a pattern there that you might need to tweak. So for example, I noticed that there was a consistent decline pattern that was happening with one of my old clients. So he specifically served the fintech industry, right? But the thing is, he didn't have conversations to do with fintech. He simply supported fintech industries in what he did, So it didn't make sense for us to pitch to fintech industry podcasts, because all they want to talk about was what was happening in fintech. See where I'm going, right? So it's kind of oh, okay, if there's a pattern, there might need to be a tweak of what I'm doing, what I'm saying. So we actually didn't no longer serve fintech industries. That's not where we pitched. We pitched him to other HR sort of podcasts, because that was his realm of work, So very subtle shifts, but sometimes it can make the biggest impact. That's why, give yourself permission to feel rejected, because it is a horrible feeling. No one likes it. So if you need to take a step back from the project, for a while, if it's something that's personal to you, then that's okay. Do that. And maybe have a team member to kind of handle some of the stuff so you're a little bit further away from it, so it doesn't feel as personal. But yeah, noticing the declines has been a big eye-opener, because it tells you what you might need to shift in your messaging so that it actually does land. So we've got a decline column, and then I've got I think 3 to 5 first follow-up, second follow-up, third follow-up. So we put the dates in there. So we normally spread it out like 5 to 7 days from the pitch until the follow-up, and then next follow-up, because podcasters do get annoyed when they get followed up too soon, like the next day, multiple times a day, all that, because it feels a bit too eager, right? I had a podcaster friend who told me that she was legitimately pissed off about that. So note to self, 5 to 7 days is a good time frame, because especially if this is a pretty high ranking podcast that you're going for, they're going to have a lot of admin to deal with anyway. So you might just get caught in the shuffle with that. So that's why follow-up is good. But doing it too soon makes you come across as very eager, which can be misconstrued as desperation and wanting it for yourself. Again, the whole self-importance before service thing. So that's what I'd recommend in regards to follow-up and just how to lay it all out. So we'll pop that link for anybody who wants to use that way. You can go as complex as you want. I keep it really simple and bare bones.
No, I love it. I love how organized that sounds. And my brain just lit up when you mentioned it was all color coded. I'm like, oh, this is my love language. But no, thank you so much. I want to be respectful of your time. I know we are close to 50 minutes in, which is amazing.
You know, I'm gonna use it. I'm gonna, like, if you got anything that came to mind, like, is up to you. But so no, long as our trainees got some value from that, it's all good.
I am very sure they did. But if they want to connect with you further or learn more about everything that you do, what would the best place for them to go be?
Yes. So if you are interested in seeing like what podcasters really think and like what they want to see in well-meaning guests to pitch to them, I've got a really great collaborative resource. It's called Be Our Podcast Guest. There's a little reference to Beauty and the Beast if you're a Disney fan. But that's when I asked 25 podcasters to share their out-of-the-box advice for people who want to pitch to podcasters in 2020 and beyond. I know we're in 2021. I'm working on the update at the time of this recording, but the reason why that's there is because I wanted to demonstrate, like, look, it's not just me projecting my experience like into a resource. I wanted to see like, oh, how can we like validate this, me as a podcaster, me as a guest, getting results from my clients, and also asking podcasters what they look for. So if anything, this further affirms everything that I've taught you today. And obviously every podcast is going to have a slightly different angle, but you will see the patterns, that all podcasters want. And it is wrapped up in the PR method, personalization and relevancy. You cannot go wrong with that. And so if you're interested in getting that free resource, all you need to do is go to 25experts.maikeetsang.com, and I'll share that link with Aman. So that way, you don't need to worry about spelling my name wrong with or without the hyphen or that kind of thing, right? And if you are interested in just like keeping in touch in general, I'd love to see how you're doing with your podcast pitching. Please do connect with me on Instagram. That's by far the most active social media platform. So yeah, so you got 3 things. You've got the 25 experts resource, you've got the blank directory spreadsheet thingy, and if you're interested in connecting with me on Instagram, because I would love to just like keep in touch with you, all of you trainees.
Perfect. We'll get links to those. We'll pop them in the chat now, and we'll also put them in the notes underneath the replay on Terrain. Thank you so much, Mai-Kee. This was incredible. I'm all fired up to go pitch a bunch of podcasts, and I will
say pinching. Oh, okay. You can pinch me, love. It's all right.
I love it. Awesome. Thank you so much. Super, super excited to be able to share this, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.